Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back on another video from Too Spooky, and today we're checking out the top 10 Resurrección in Bleach. Love checking out some Bleach content every once in a while. Can't wait for the 1,000-year blood war, it's going to be absolutely sick. But yeah, can't believe I missed another top 10 to do with Bleach. We're going to get it straight into it. Some Too Spooky.
How is it going, everybody?
Too Spooky here.
In this video today, we're going to be counting down the top 10
I love this.
Resurrección in Bleach.
Alright.
It's been quite a while since our last Bleach top 10, where
That was a
we
good
went over the top 10 Shikai in the series. And in that video, we set a light goal to achieve another Bleach top 10 somewhere down the line. It took a little while, but that light goal was finally met. And
Let's
with
go.
the anime coming back sometime
I can't
this year
wait.
or next year, I knew it was finally time to make this one happen. On that note, once this video hits 15,000 likes, I will be
If it's not reached it yet,
Bleach top 10.
link is in the
top 10
description.
abilities.
Cool.
So after giving this video a watch, if you end up enjoying it, make sure to destroy that like button so I can read
Love
that
it.
one in the future.
That's class.
Now, without further ado, beware of spoilers up to the full brain arc.
Sick.
Excuse my awful pronunciation. And let's quickly go over the rules and stipulations I've put in place when
Awesome.
it comes to my ranking of the top 10 Resurrección in Bleach.
Cool.
The first thing to note would be that this will be mainly ranking the Resurrección of Espada or other high-level Arrancar.
Makes sense.
As their releases are without a doubt the most powerful,
Yeah.
most unique, and most useful for various combat situations. That said, it is not limited to only Espada or former Espada, and any individual with a Resurrección was considered while putting my ranking together.
Sweet.
Though, as you can probably imagine, non-Espada releases will be very few and far between on the list.
Well, yeah, because they're not
The
as
second thing to note would be that this
as powerful or
is
as
not
effective.
a ranking of the strongest Resurrección. Instead, I'm ranking them in terms of which I believe are the best overall. This does, of course, take their overall strength into consideration, but I'm also looking at any unique abilities included with the release, and how those abilities could potentially be used to defeat even those that would be considered the physically strongest. While unrelated to my placements, I'll additionally be giving each Resurrección's appearance a rating from 1 to 10,
Cool.
just to spice it up. The third thing to note is that in the mobile game, Bleach Brave Souls, the Espada were all given new second release forms, or third release in Ukiora's case.
Yeah, he got that other... Wow, they look sick. Whoa!
However, they are only for the mobile game,
Right.
and therefore will not be mentioned or considered for this top 10.
Okay, that's fair.
The final thing to
They look
note
awesome.
is that this is obviously my own personal opinion.
You're not allowed one of those.
To support each of my arguments in a semi-professional manner, I'll be backing up each of these opinions with facts from the series to support my arguments. So whether you agree or disagree, I hope you enjoy. And with that,
Get into
tell
it.
me what your top 10 Resurrección would be and why in the comments down below.
Let's go.
Now, without any more delay, let's begin with some
Honorable
mentions.
Okay.
Like I stated in the rules, I did consider all of the Arrancar for this list, though outside of the Espada, not very many of them had impressive abilities.
Fair.
That said, there were a few stragglers that had potential, and I wanted to at least highlight them before we talked about the main list.
Cool.
Within the Espada or former Espada that didn't quite make the list, I wanted to highlight Adanero and Neliel's Resurrección, as both showed considerable potential to be pretty good.
Yeah, they were pretty sick.
Adanero had the general ability to absorb the abilities, spiritual pressure, and appearances of anyone he consumed.
Which is pretty damn
His
sick.
release is basically combining all of the powers and abilities of those hollows he's consumed together. So theoretically, it could be really good.
Yeah.
But that solely depends on the various powers and abilities of the hollows
That they actually have.
consumed.
Yeah.
Obviously, in his case, he's eaten a frick ton, but even with over 30,000 hollows and all their abilities and power combined, he was defeated by Rukia instantly after releasing.
Yeah, so
as
yeah,
good as
not
it sounds
that great.
on paper, if you can get one shot by Rukia of all characters, it kind of really sucks. Plus, since this release requires the abilities of others to even function, and all that stockpiling can still get taken down by a character who was once bodied by a regular hollow, it's pointless to actually rank it. And instead, it just gets an honorable mention.
Fair.
And with Neliel being the former third Espada, I can only hypothesize that her release form probably has an extreme amount of power behind it. However, other than looking like a badass centaur,
It looks sick.
all we really saw her do in that form was throw her lance. and with just
That's
that,
true.
it's hard to accurately rank her Resurrección based on so little. So I decided it couldn't make
Not
it
many
any
feats.
further than the honorable mentions as a result. After that, within the Privaron Espada, Cirucci's Resurrección had a lot of potential, with its ability to vibrate its wings to such high frequencies that they could block most attacks, and also make them strong enough to
damn
cut
handy
basically
ability to
any
have.
solid object. It's just unfortunate she was subjected to Kubo's Udiyu problem, aka, let me show off this new Quincy tool real quick that conveniently will solve whatever problem I'm facing. Although
Yes, that was always the way, wasn't it? It's like, it's funny you have that ability because I can then do this.
The other releases that did make the list, leaving it as an honorable mention. After that, within the various Fraction, the only Resurrección that really stood out to me was Abirama's. There were a lot that were somewhat cool or could at the very least be mentioned for their standout techniques, but honestly they are all severely undermined by every Espada's release.
Yeah, the Espada ones is
Abirama's
just up there,
release,
man.
however, turns him into a bird person.
It looks cool.
Giving him the ability to fly. I'm sorry, what? Everyone in Bleach can already fly?
Oh.
But I thought Ichigo needed that special tool to fly. Oh, they completely forgot about that? Well, what the hell? Why did I even consider this guy? Oh, right. Okay, well, ignore the flying bit. But I basically chose Abirama because he can shoot his feathers, which there are obviously a lot of. And they not only have extreme accuracy, but they also have the properties of steel, making them
break through a
contact,
lot of stuff. That's
making him the original Hawks from My Hero Academia.
Very,
which,
very
if
true.
you watch that anime too, you'll see the potential Abirama could have with his abilities.
That,
but
okay,
because
yeah.
his only potential, he'll remain an honorable mention.
Right, we're
the
getting
final two Resurrección I wanted to mention are that of Rudborn and Loli. Rudborn for
They
his
look
ability
sick.
to create unlimited amounts of cannon fodder, and Loli
The
for
Putty
her ability
Patrol.
to poison and erode anything her arms touch. But because
That's
cannon fodder
effective.
will always be cannon fodder, and poison erosion is held by a worthless harlot that beat my precious Orihime,
How
they
dare
will
she.
remain honorable mentions. Now, to the actual list.
Alright, number 10.
10.
There we go.
Pantera. This Resurrección is possessed by Grimjow
So
Jet
sick.
Jack. Pantera allows Grimjow to transform into a panther-like form.
So cool.
That generally increases his speed,
He's so
strength,
fast.
endurance, and defensive capabilities. In addition to boosting his overall stats, it also gives him a couple of unique abilities or techniques, those being Gada de la Pantera, which is where Grimjow can fire up to 5 sharp bombs from his elbow.
Oh, okay, forgot about that. That's pretty cool.
These bombs can seemingly be fired as often as Grimjow wants, though he does take a few seconds of preparation to actually do it. A single one of these bombs was strong enough to destroy an entire gigantic column. But at the same
they're
time,
huge.
Ichigo was able to take 5 of these into his back at once and continue fighting. Grimjow's other technique being Desgadan, which is where he creates large glowing claws that act as projectiles he can toss at his enemies. Grimjow noted this to be his strongest technique. However, unfortunately we never got to see the extent of what these claws could do to an opponent, as Ichigo was able to shatter them before they could do any damage. Right off the bat, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from some of you, as Grimjow is obviously a very popular
He's a
character,
fan favourite, isn't he? My god.
Criticism is kind of a no-no. But as far as his Resurrección goes, it's kind of basic compared to all the others that will appear on this list.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
I don't think it's bad by any means.
No, it's just like compared to what
I think
everyone
it's
else
generally
does or
quite
looks like in
decent
that.
and well-balanced. But it's just lacking a lot when it comes to anything that really impresses me or stands out. The overall stat boost is obviously a given, but what helps it actually make the list and stand out from many of the others is its projectile attacks, even if one of those attacks was never really given its time to shine. Although speed and close combat is generally what's most important in Bleach's battles, being able to send a powerful ranged attack at your enemy has proven to be a crucial factor within a lot of the more high-intensity fights. And because Grimjow possesses some ranged attacks with his release, it pushes it just enough for me to believe it is one of the best, even if it's the worst of the best.
The worst of the best is still good.
The other factor that holds it down for me personally would be the addition of his forearm blades, as that requires Grimjow to get even more up close and personal
Needs to get,
really shine
needs to get in there.
But again, overall, it's very well rounded, and with the addition of ranged attacks, I think it deserves a spot on the list of the best.
Fair dues. Number
When
9.
it comes to the unique look of Grimmjow's release,
Oh yeah,
I'm
he said he was going to give
giving
it.
8 out of 10,
Yeah,
as
the way it looks.
think
Yeah.
it has one of the coolest looking
It is
designs,
very
and
cool.
it meshes very well with his personality. However, I do think it borders a little too closely to furry material, and
It's
that's what
quite
cost it a
close.
few points in my book. Number 9.
Number 9.
Santa Teresa.
Okay.
This Resurrección
Yo.
is possessed by Neutra Gilga. Santa Teresa allows Neutra to basically grow 4 extra arms for a total of 6.
That's mental.
Additionally giving him a gigantic scythe-like weapon for each arm. Similar to Grimmjow's release, Santa Teresa essentially boosts all of Neutra's stats.
Yeah.
And as the espada with the supposed strongest hierro, it makes it even harder to damage him in this
Ho,
form.
ho, ho.
The 2 additional abilities this Resurrección grants would be almost instant regeneration, as Neutra is able to regenerate wounds extremely quickly, and also
Decent
completely
technique to have.
regenerate severed limbs. And with 6 arms, if you're somehow able to cut off a few of them, it's really not going to do you much good if you can just grow them right back.
Yeah, definitely.
The other additional ability is weapon creation, as whenever Neutra loses one of his giant scythes, he can literally create a new one from any of his
I mean, that's
forearms.
pretty mad that he can do
My
that.
main reason for placing this one at number 9 on the list is because I feel it's a bit underrated, but also not impressive enough to place it any higher up.
Yeah, that's
Just
cool.
comparing it to our previous entry with Grimmjow, Santa Teresa is essentially just Pantera, but way better.
Yeah, just better, yeah.
Obviously, they aren't
It's
the
an
same
improvement
thing,
upon
but
that.
this release severely outclasses Grimmjow's in my opinion. What Grimmjow has in speed, Neutra makes up for in defense,
Definitely.
strength, and regeneration. To the point where even a monster like Kenpachi needed a few extra minutes to actually damage him.
Yeah.
And while legitimate power scaling in Bleach is kind of pointless because of how all over the place it is, I think it's fair to say Neutra was able to hold his own against Kenpachi for the majority of their fight. Obviously not having the upper hand, but even just being able to combat that monster successfully is
still for him.
impressive in its own right. In the previous entry, I praised Grimmjow for having possession of a ranged ability, which made his otherwise underwhelming release more worthy in my eyes. But with Neutra, this release very much solidifies him as a very close-range fighter, therefore making him lack in the range department. That said,
yeah, he
one
ain't
thing
attacking
I don't
anyone
really
from a
want
distance
people
with
to
all
think
that.
about with this one would be the fact that this Resurrección technically does have a ranged attack, or at least the capability to. Outside of his release, Neutra's unique weapon has a chain attached that he uses to attack his opponents at a distance, so we already know he has plenty of experience throwing his weapon. Now take the fact that he can reproduce weapons whenever he loses one, and we essentially have an endless supply of gigantic scythes that he can just whip at his enemies, giving him an extreme advantage in battle. As at close range, he's an absolute tank, with multiple arms to combat many opponents
Yeah, that's a
at once,
big
and
attack,
any
like
injuries he might
coming in
endure
it.
will only keep healing instantaneously. And then at range, he can cleave people in half by throwing his weapons, or at the very least keep them from getting any closer. Overall, making me believe that this release is a lot better than most people give it credit for, and therefore worthy of being called one of the best at number 9. However, it still doesn't quite hold the candle to the rest we'll be talking about.
How's it look, though?
When it comes to the unique look of Neutra's release, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Oh, you think it's
as
more?
I
It looks better than?
really love Neutra's design from the start, and I think his release form only further adds to his menacing, creepy.
You see, I don't think it looks as impressive as Grimmjow's, but okay.
Number 8, Tibudan.
Yo.
This Resurrección is possessed by Tyr Hollybell. Tibudan allows Hollybell to become
I'm a fan.
sexy, scantily clad shark lady
Yo.
with the ability to create and manipulate water to varying degrees.
It's a 10
with
out
her
of 10 of the
shark-toothed
looks.
sword arm.
Oof.
In addition to absolute sex appeal,
God damn,
this
yes.
release, of course, increases her normal Arrancar abilities and makes her stronger. When it comes to the specifics of her water manipulation, she namely demonstrated it with 4 different techniques. Trident, which allows her to create a large high-pressured water slash that is capable of easily cutting someone in half.
Yeah.
Lagota, which allows her to condense the water at the tip of her sword and fire it as a projectile.
Crazy. Like, it's so
creating
sick that
enough
she's got
force
close and
to easily
long-range
destroy
stuff
entire
going on.
buildings. Cascada, which allows her to essentially launch a humongous surge of
Wasn't
water
that a
at her
dance
opponent,
group? Didn't they
which
do, like,
causes a
music,
great deal
Cascada?
of force to be dropped
I
upon
recognise
them,
that
and the
name.
sheer size of the attack makes it hard to escape. And finally, Irviendo, which allows her to boil water at will, which includes any water or ice coming towards her, or boiling her own water for greater damage. The main reason I feel Tibudan deserves to be on the list is because water manipulation at any level can be a very dangerous technique.
Yes, it can, my god.
For instance, pressurized water by itself can become sharper than any blade, but add on the ability to boil it, create endless amounts of it, or even manipulate it outside of her own body, and you've got some deadly water bending on your hands. I've already explained the importance of projectiles, so I won't repeat it, but add on the fact that these projectiles can not only be extremely powerful, but also extremely precise and sharp. And considering this water can be created and projected almost instantaneously, it would be hard for any competent fighter to best it, especially those that need to fight at close range. Boiling water by itself
you're running a dangerous game trying to get in close there.
Mess with. Todoroki can explain to you exactly why that is. In addition to those insanely useful abilities, as the third Espada, we can only assume how much physically stronger Holybell became with this release, making it a deadly Resurrección to go up against, no matter who you are. But even so, there are still plenty of Resurrección that could take this one down in my opinion, forcing me to unfortunately place it lower than I probably should, at number 8.
But how's it
When
look?
it comes to the unique look of Holybell's release, I'm giving Shark Mommy a 10.
There you go.
10.
Yeah, man.
You know exactly why.
Oh, yeah.
Number 7.
Love it.
Ira. This Resurrección is possessed by Yami Largo.
Oh, okay.
Ira allows Yami to become a hulking mass of destruction.
Absolute
going
powerhouse.
From what would be perceived as the 10th and therefore weakest Espada to the Zero
which is,
strongest Espada. Ira
power
is unique compared
house.
to the other Resurrección, as Yami is the only Espada who can conserve his spiritual power by eating and sleeping, essentially being able to store as much spiritual power as he can with no cap on its limits. After storing enough power, Yami is able to activate his Resurrección, which also insinuates he needs to conserve a certain amount of spiritual power before this transformation is even possible. The specific amount to achieve this is unknown. That said, once he transforms into a gigantic behemoth, the actual ability of Ira is that of rage. As the angrier Yami gets, the stronger he gets. This also insinuates that there is no real cap on how strong Yami can be, though I'd be willing to bet there is a limit to how angry anyone can get, even that of the angriest man in the world. And because of that, there is a limit to this power after all. Something else interesting to note about this rage would be that after Yami achieves an undisclosed amount of anger, he is able to transform again into an even bigger, bulkier, and more pissed off form that heals.
I am at my angriest.
Simultaneously in the process. This transformation is almost like a second release, similar to Ukiora, and this also makes me wonder if at an even angrier stage, Yami can transform even further.
My god,
however,
it's a Furby!
Before his death. Like I mentioned in the stipulations portion of the video, this list is not just a ranking of pure power, because if it was, this entry would likely be number 1, based on the sole idea that it has the potential to be the physically strongest release without question. But at the end of the day, this supposed unlimited strength was still bested by 2 captain-level Soul Reapers.
Yeah, that's true.
The full extent of that battle may
come on, like, you're not going to want to fight those guys.
If power was really that impressive, it wouldn't have been so effortless to take down. In what we did see of that battle before Yami transformed even further, his limbs were getting slashed apart left and right, showing that Yami's defensive capabilities aren't all that impressive.
Yeah, he was very just physical, brute force, punch stuff.
A great deal of force. They were still able to get back up like nothing happened. Kind of embarrassing for the supposed strongest Espada.
Yeah, but it's Kenpachi, man.
While I think this release was
Kenpachi.
very underwhelming in every aspect, I still have to give it some credit. Physical strength is still a very important factor in these rankings, and due to the fact Ira excels in physical strength above the rest by far, it shows us that it deserves a place on this list, as anyone at the level of characters like Rukia and Renji are absolutely no match for it, which proves Yami could decimate most opponents who come his way without a second thought. However, when up against any captain-level opponents, that's apparently too much for it to handle. I know I'm downplaying it a bit, as those captains still had to put in the work to actually take Yami down,
but like,
it still shows us that Yami really wasn't deserving of his top spot within the Espada.
Big brawn, small brain.
But in regards to the rankings of the Resurrección themselves, hypothetically putting it up against the previous few releases on the list, I think this one could outplay them fairly well by overwhelming them with size and force.
Well, yeah,
but
definitely.
Up against the upcoming Resurrección that not only have great strength, but also horrifyingly useful abilities, I don't think Ira can be realistically any higher than this.
No.
Because aside from physical strength, endurance, gigantification, and regeneration at an angrier second release stage, this ability doesn't have anything else going for it. It has no other interesting new abilities that could give it
it doesn't have anything else fun going on. It is just, I'm the Hulk, but Godzilla size.
Incredibly disappointing, but still good enough to be our number 7.
How's it look?
When it comes to the unique look of Yami's release, I'm giving the first transformation a 6 out of 10, for at least looking somewhat cool in a giant Godzilla meets Hulk kind of way.
I just said it's a Godzilla Hulk.
It's a 2 out of 10, and it looks like doo-doo.
Does look crap, like, to be fair.
Look at this dude. Look at the top of his head. Look at his lips.
Oh my god.
Damn, boy. Damn, boy, he's thick. Boy, that's a thick ass boy.
Can we get to the next one, please? Oh my god.
Number 6.
Thank god.
Suzumushi Hayukushiki Grillar Grillar. This Resurrección is possessed by Kaname Tosen.
This is interesting.
Our first and only non-Espada on the list, and also the only Soul Reaper who was able to obtain a Resurrección.
Very interesting, like, idea.
Transforms Tosen into a gigantic, fly, hollow-looking thing.
Yeah, but he can see
Its
now.
main ability is that of further enhancing his already existing sound-related abilities. One technique he was able to show being Los Nueve Aspectos, which is where he draws a circle in the air that then turns into a destructive sonic boom that deals unprecedented damage to whatever it strikes. Namely being able to take down Komamura's Bankai in one hit.
Which is crazy.
This Resurrección additionally makes Tosen significantly stronger than he was before, as in this form he was able to catch the gigantic sword from Komamura's Bankai and also crack it just by clenching his fist. The final notable ability this release grants is instantaneous regeneration, though this proved to be worthless against a fatal blow.
Yeah.
I'll keep this one short and simple, as we really didn't get to see the full extent of this release, because Tosen was killed shortly after initially releasing it. We already know that massive strength and instantaneous regeneration is a big plus in my book.
Definitely.
So in addition to those, the main reason I believe this ability is so much better than the previous ones is simply because of its main ability to manipulate sound at a destructive level. Bleach has shown us the horrors of having our senses manipulated.
Yes, it has. Oh my god.
What makes so terrifying is that it can theoretically take down most opponents he'd come across if he just used it correctly. Basically, anyone Tosen would ever come across would probably have ears. And with the ability to create a sonic boom that can one-shot a giant, imagine if he used that ability right up against someone's ear.
Like, yeah, they ain't gonna like that.
They ain't gonna like that at all. For the rest of their life, but they're also likely going to be fucking dead from the sheer force of that sonic boom.
That's true.
Enough to blow anyone's head clean off. And if somehow they manage to actually survive that, they'd be so disoriented from the inner ear damage that they'd probably completely lose their balance, all of their hearing, get confused, dizzy, or worse, to the point where they couldn't even fight back anymore, allowing Tosen to just finish them off. Sound manipulation is such an underrated and deadly ability, and if Tosen would have used it more effectively with his newfound sonic destruction, I believe this Resurrección should receive its well-deserved praise.
Yeah, you got some valid points there, man. That's, yeah, it just wasn't used correctly.
That said, the best is yet to come.
How's it look?
When it comes to the unique look of Tosen's release, I'm giving it a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, it looks great.
It's repulsive and ugly as hell.
He's not wrong, though.
Number 5.
He's not wrong.
Los Lobos. This Resurrección is possessed by Coyote Stark
cool.
and technically Lillinet Gingerbuck. Unlike other Arrancar, Stark and Lillinet are two halves of the same being. Therefore, when going into Resurrección, the two, once again, become one. Los Lobos essentially transforms Stark into a gunslinger, equipped with two pistols. Those pistols essentially being Lillinet herself, who can communicate telepathically with Stark. The ability of these pistols is that they allow him to fire his Cero in a controlled manner.
So sick. Like, oh my god, that's such a dangerous technique.
Or firing somewhat weaker Cero at an extremely fast speed. These pistols allow him to have the ultimate range technique when it comes to Resurrección, which, as you already know, gives it big brownie points in my personal ranking. And it doesn't stop there. With the addition of his named technique, Cero Meltra Ulta, Stark can fire up to 1,000 Cero at once, making it borderline impossible to successfully dodge all of them. Stark can also willingly sacrifice these pistols to create a large pack of energy wolves. These wolves are similar to flames, in the fact that they can easily navigate through tight spaces, and if struck, they will instantly reform. The wolf's purpose is to hunt down whatever target Stark chooses, where they will then chase down, bite their target, and explode, creating a blast that is significantly stronger than any Cero, proven by the fact these wolves were able to instantly take down 2 captain-level targets with a single explosion.
Crazy.
After creating the wolves, Stark was also able to use a technique called Comilo, where he created 2 energy blades that are at least as powerful as the standard blade of a Shikai. If all that wasn't enough, Stark is given a further boost to his strength, speed, and endurance, and being the first Espada, who was already capable of killing piles of hollows just by being in his presence, we can only theorize how strong Stark actually was.
His spiritual pressure must be something else.
I've talked a lot about the importance of ranged attacks with these rankings, and with Stark being the poster child of ranged attacks, I can't help but have a little favoritism. Cero by themselves are something we haven't had to talk much about, because they aren't exclusive to Resurrección. But because Stark's release specializes in them, I think it's significant to note that technically all Arrancar who can perform a Cero have a ranged attack already, regardless of if they get a new ranged attack in their release. However, most Arrancar require some sort of preparation to actually fire a Cero successfully, and can therefore be prevented from doing so. But with Stark, who already has an extremely powerful Cero and can fire it instantaneously, being able to fire up to 1,000 of them at the same time is kind of stupid broken in terms of destructive potential. Insane. It forces any close combat fighters to be constantly on the defensive. And if for some miracle they were actually able to dodge every Cero and get close enough to Stark to strike him, his extreme speed makes it questionable on if they could even land a hit. And even if they did, his defensive capabilities will likely prevent them from doing much damage. As for instance, when smacked full force with Tengu Madu, he was barely even scratched.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just getting back up. Come on, man.
He surpass his already immensely strong Cero with heat-seeking, indestructible wolves, making it so you can't escape death when up against him. Stark himself, as a very aloof, unmotivated individual, failed to show us his true potential. But I truly believe this Resurrección is one of the best in terms of speed and destruction.
My god, it is, yeah, definitely.
It could easily overwhelm almost anyone in the Bleach universe, especially if Stark was actually trying. And with all of that, believe it or not, I still think there are Resurrección that are better than this one, giving it a final placement smack dab in the middle of the list at number 5.
How does it look?
When it comes to the unique appearance of Stark's release, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10.
Oh.
I think it's got a pretty cool darn tootin' yeehaw western look to it.
Yeah.
But as far as these releases go, I will say its appearance is slightly underwhelming. It's pretty decent, but nothing overly special. Number 4.
Excuse me.
This Resurrección is possessed by Zomari Ruru.
Oh, he's weird, man.
Ruru Haiya allows Zomari to
He's meant to be one of the fastest, isn't he?
Whatever the fuck that is. Zomari's release is completely centered around the concept of having a frick ton of eyes all over his body. 50 to be exact. Zomari is so woke, he didn't just open his third eye. Man said,
"Let me open my 50th."
All of which correspond directly with his special abilities, the main one being Amor. The simplest way to explain Amor would be that every single one of his eyes can fix their gaze independently, although each one is only able to focus on a single thing at once. One Once an eye is focused on a specific object, the pupil dilates to signify it has done so, and it cannot focus on anything else once it has chosen an object, unless of course it wants to switch objects at a later time. The object in question will then have a symbol placed upon it. The real kicker is that whatever that eye is focused on is now completely under Zomari's control, and he can force that object to bend to his will and do whatever he likes. He mainly demonstrated this by taking over specific limbs of a person's body, forcing them to move outside of the owner's control.
My God.
Though, an important thing to note is that if Zomari were to target someone's head, he would then be able to control that person's entire body against their will.
So
This
it's
ability is also
pretty
not
damn
limited to just
impressive
things.
ability,
It can
like.
also be used on inanimate objects. Aside from this, Zomari also has a second ability called El Embryon, which is a defensive technique where Zomari's lower half transforms into a sphere that covers his entire body from attacks. And to prove its defensive capabilities, it should be noted that it was able to tank a full strike from Byakuya's Bankai, although Zomari was still slightly injured in the
Yeah,
process.
but that's impressive.
While using this ability, Zomari cannot use any of his eyes. The main reason why I believe this is such an overpowered release is not just because Zomari can completely control someone. Instead, it's due to the fact Zomari has the potential to control 50 things at
At the
once.
same time, yeah,
to the
that's
point where
mental,
there's
yeah.
almost no way to escape his gaze. With the ability to control so many things at once, so long as his eyesight is well trained and accurate, Zomari could single-handedly take control of an entire army. Or better yet, he could take control
He could
of some
be
of the
guts and
absolute
take down
strongest
100
characters
people
in the
by
Bleach
himself.
universe and force them to kill themselves,
Oh,
or kill
he
each other, or
could.
kill others,
Yo.
which makes this release insanely underrated and
Hey, yeah,
insanely
whoa.
broken. Considering Zomari referred to himself as the
Fastest as
Spada,
well.
I also believe he would have the speed to successfully capture most enemies in his eyesight
Yeah.
as well, so long as he was telling the truth about his speed, of course.
What a
lot of
waste.
people brush Zomari and his abilities off because he was a lower ranking Espada, and quickly defeated by Byakuya. But just
Cool.
looking at the previous Resurrección on the list, I think in a battle to the death, Zomari would come out on top against almost all of them by taking control of their body
Mate,
and just
could you
having them kill
imagine?
themselves. At least most of the time, assuming they couldn't get to him first.
Yeah.
Which is reason enough for me to believe it deserves a much higher spot on the list than you'd probably expect going into
That's
it.
interesting. Yeah.
However, the main reason why absolute body control isn't higher than this is because there are better releases to still be seen. And I do admit, although this ability is really, really good, it still has its fair share of flaws. For instance, this ability is fundamentally similar enough to Kido, to the point where Kido could block his eyesight by putting up a wall, and things like a blinding light could prevent his eyes from being able to fix their gaze.
Right.
So all in all, this Resurrección has one of the most underrated and scary abilities to be seen, to the point where its general lack in physical power is completely void, because Zomari has the potential to take someone else's physical power for his own. But even with the ability to take on almost any enemy and turn them against themselves or worse, there are still enough flaws to prevent it from going any higher, leaving it at number 4. When it comes to the unique appearance of
Yeah,
Zomari's
it's pretty
release,
low.
I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. It honestly makes him look like
It does
a
look more
clown,
impressive
like
than the
a
fly-looking one,
bona
but
fide
yeah.
circus freak. It's just really unappealing and ugly. But like I said earlier, this dude was high-key the wokest man in the galaxy at one point. And regardless of how dumb it makes him look, I think we all need to respect him for the drip. At least a little bit.
Sir, grab me that creature.
But sir, that's an Espada!
Grab me that creature.
Number 3.
I've seen those.
Murcielago. This Resurrección is possessed by Ukiora
We're number 3. Okay.
Murcielago allows Ukiora to become Batman, immensely increasing his
Okay.
strength, speed, defense, endurance,
So
and also
freaking
granting him
amazing.
a spiffy new black arrow and an energy saber he can throw at people or use as a close-ranged weapon. Doesn't sound too special compared to everything else we've previously talked about, right? Well,
Wow.
you are right, and this release wouldn't be as high on the list as it is just for that. Instead, what makes this Resurrección so special is that unlike other Arrancar, aside from maybe Yami, Ukiora found a way to achieve a
release.
second stage to Resurrección.
Let's go
which
to
amplifies
go
all its
beyond
power
even further.
So now those already immensely increased stats are bumped up to incomprehensible levels, to the point where his speed is so fast that he's able to basically teleport.
That
His
was one hell of a
strength is strong
scene
enough
where he
to
just
the point
grabs
where he
Ichigo's
was
head.
able to beat
Bam.
Ichigo to near death with only his tail. And his defense is so rock solid that even some of the more powerful attacks wouldn't even leave a scratch. And even with all that pure power, Ukiora's biggest strength in this release was his regenerative abilities, to the point where he could instantaneously regenerate any part of his body. However, his internal organs cannot be regenerated no matter what, so once they're gone, they're gone. But if all he were to lose were limbs and such, or get a couple scratches here and there, he would always be able to get them right back and heal right up.
Mental.
And even after losing some internal organs, he was still able to regenerate normally. But after losing too many, he will simply fade to dust.
Bye-bye.
That energy saber we briefly mentioned earlier is also immensely upgraded, now called Lanza del Relampago. These energy sabers can be used as a close-range weapon that basically disintegrates any body part they touch.
The explosion on it is just
thrown
mental.
as a ranged weapon to create massive explosions that clearly outclass even the Black Zero. Ukiora can create as many of these as he likes and use them as often
Which
as
is
possible.
mental. Absolutely
Though it's
mental.
been noted by Ukiora himself that he can't throw them too close to himself, or he could end up accidentally killing himself from the immense blast they create.
That's a
truly
statement.
demonstrating their destructive power. While this entry certainly has a little personal bias on my part, I think it's a pretty standard agreement that Murcielago is one of the best Resurrección we've seen
Yeah, it's definitely
in
up there,
terms
Jesus.
of all-around strength, speed, and destructive power. But it certainly wouldn't be that impressive without its second release. It's really hard to power scale in Bleach, which is why I don't see the point in doing it on a really technical level. But going into his final fight with Ichigo, Ukiora's first release was enough to make Ichigo look like an absolute clown. And the second release
And then he
was
just went
just an
further.
attempt to straight up embarrass him for still wanting to fight against something so out of his league. Yet, after their fight, regardless of the hollow transformation shenanigans, Unohana basically said that Ichigo surpasses captain level. So either he just immensely evolved during his fight with Ukiora, which tends to happen with Ichigo, or Ichigo, a beyond captain level person, was getting slapped around by this Resurrección to the point of game-ending himself. While other captains like Shunsui were able to take on an Espada with debatably even more power and make it look a lot easier. So you see what I mean when I say these power level shenanigans just don't make the most sense. But
it's
assuming
pretty
that
hard,
everything
isn't
said
it?
there is true, with the addition of second release, Ukiora likely had one of the strongest releases outside of maybe Yami or Stark. That argument alone is enough to make the list for me. But what places Murcielago so high in comparison is the destructive power, speed, and instant regeneration this second release provides. The speed alone makes Mr. Fastest Espada look even more like a doofus, but the destructive energy saber...
I am the fastest, and then, oh, never mind, he's going quite faster than I.
I'd probably compare their power to that of something like Stark's Wolves, being much more powerful than that of a Cero, and being able to basically one-hit a captain. Though unlike Stark's Wolves, which are limited, Ukiora can just spam these as much as he wants, to basically nuke anyone in the surrounding areas. Plus, when fighting up close, these make a killer close-ranged weapon, akin to that of a lightsaber against flesh. Now, to bring it all home, Ukiora can afford to be a little reckless with this ability as well, since he can regenerate his body parts immediately after losing them, making this by far one of the most well-rounded and powerful abilities we've seen, and easily one of the best Resurrección in the series. But even so, it's still not perfect, with its lack of regeneration for organs, and just the way it was able to get slapped around by an even more powerful enemy, let alone the fact that there are still 2 Resurrección left that I believe are better than this one, leaving it at number 3 on our list.
I give it a 9 out of 10 for the
When
look.
it comes to the unique appearance of Ukiora's release, I'm giving his first release an 8 out of 10,
Okay, yeah, it looks...
as I think its appearance is very underrated. It just looks extremely cool. But I do have to say his second release is far better and completely overshadows the first one. And I will give his second release a 10 out of 10.
Okay, cool.
As the dark emo edgelord inside me can't help but think it's absolutely badass.
Ukiora.
Number 2. Fornicadas.
What?
This Resurrección is possessed by Zelapodo Grants.
Okay.
Fornicadas allows Zale to perform a number of different abilities. First off, through his visual transformation, he obtains these 4 tentacle-like appendages on his back. These tentacles
I do remember him
can
being
not
very,
only be
very,
used
very
to protect
weird.
him from attacks, and are shown to be quite durable, But they also have a special ability called Teatro de Tirade,
Teatro
which is
de
where he
Tirade.
physically wraps his tentacles around an enemy, and after quickly spitting them back out, he's able to create a small voodoo doll of sorts based on that enemy, which not only mimics any damage done upon itself to the enemy it's based on, but it can also be popped open to reveal small labeled rocks or sticks that represent all the organs
It's absolutely
and
crazy.
tendons
It's,
of the enemy
okay,
it's
yeah,
based on.
this ability
for
is so
instance, Zale can pick
crazy.
up a stick labeled stomach and snap it in half, in turn destroying the actual stomach of his enemy.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Zale
this ability
also
is
granted
really,
the
really
ability
broken.
to exert an enormous amount of black liquid from his back. However, this black liquid is far from normal, because if even a drop of this liquid touches his opponent, it will create a complete copy of them. These copies appear to follow Zale's commands, or at the very least, they act independently with the goal of fighting
Yeah,
Zale's
this guy's
enemies.
power's
The scary
broken,
part
man.
of these
Huh.
copies is that they get all the same abilities of the person they're cloned off of, and if you were to defeat one of these clones, they would simply break apart and multiply, creating a seemingly endless number of them until you are simply overwhelmed and killed. Zale is able to slightly alter their appearances at will, and is also able to completely disperse them whenever he chooses.
Huh.
Outside of Zale dispersing them himself, a way to defeat them completely was never shown. His final ability and ultimate technique involves self-reincarnation, and is called Gabriel. If Zale takes a significant amount of damage in battle, to the point where he would die, he is able to be reborn by impregnating an opponent. Similar to the xenomorphs in the movie Alien, he is able to place a portion of himself inside the enemy through physical contact, and that portion inside the enemy will then feed on their insides and bodily fluids until he's completely regrown, where a new Zale will then leave the victim's body, almost always killing them in the process. The final ability of this release is if Zale is ever consumed by an enemy, he is able to completely liquefy himself inside the being that consumed him and take complete control over its nervous system. Zale
Broken?
isn't one of the strongest Espada by far, and
But the
unlike
ability?
the other
Jesus.
Resurrección, he doesn't appear to get some huge stat boost upon release. Instead, he gets some of the most frighteningly devastating abilities in
Yeah, they're
the
crazy
entire
when you
series
describe what he can actually
that
do.
are
It's like,
so good, in
whoa.
fact, that I believe this is one of the best releases we've seen. I've already explained what each of these crazy abilities are, so I won't dwell on them too much, but I at least need to explain my opinion on why I believe these abilities are so broken. To start with the black liquid that creates copies of people, it's essentially an ability that will, without a doubt, kill anyone it's used against,
Yeah.
regardless of how long it takes. In the manga, Zale dispelled the clones he created because he was getting impatient. But assuming he actually took his time and let the ability run its course, it could defeat almost anyone in the Bleach
Definitely,
universe
my
aside
God.
from maybe a select few, regardless of how powerful that enemy is. If they get hit with the black goo, they're going to keep having to fight themselves over and over and over and over and over again, creating more of themselves every time they defeat one.
Yeah, it's
until
crazy.
the point where they just get so overwhelmed, exhausted, defeated, whatever it be, that they just can't take it anymore and end up getting killed by themselves. Not only that, because since these clones get to use all of that person's abilities against them, if they have some stupid, overpowered ability themselves, that ability
Is then
turned
used by
right
all the
back on
clones.
The person who developed it, time and time
That's
again.
mental.
It's actually extremely broken. The
It does
only
seem
way
it.
I could theorize to defeat this ability would be to kill Zale himself, and maybe his death would trigger the dispersal of the clones.
Maybe.
But to do
We don't know that.
you'd have to kill him without being close enough for him to touch you, because if he does, he can not only break all of your organs with a frickin' voodoo doll, but he could also impregnate you with himself until he eventually just kills you upon his rebirth. And through rebirth, if you somehow managed to defeat him up to that point, now you have to start from square one and do it all over again.
Mental.
It's an ability that is extremely hard to win against, and unless you're like Mayuri and have prior knowledge to these abilities before going into battle, or you just have some sort of magical solution for any problem, there's almost no way to understand or counteract the show you're up against. So, because of how fundamentally universal and unstoppable this ability is, I have no choice but to consider
It does
one
have
of the
to be that
best
high, doesn't it? It's like, it's
Resurrección in the
incredible.
series at number 2. However, there is still one more release that tops them all. When it comes to the unique appearance of Zael's release, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
It looks cool.
In general, I think it's not the most visually appealing, and in fact looks kind of slimy and gross. But that said, it has this odd, otherworldly charm to it that fits very well with Zael's twisted personality, and actually looks pretty cool in a rockstar Marilyn Manson kind of way. Now the moment you've all been waiting for.
I thought as much.
Number 1. Arrogante.
I thought as much.
This Resurrección is possessed by Baragon Baran. Arrogante allows Baragon to transform into death itself, giving him a very spooky appearance. Though, what is truly
It's the aging thing, isn't it, that you can do?
Abilities. First off, it does make Baragon much more durable, as for instance, he took a full-on nuke to the face and was only damaged a little bit.
There was that Sharingan that popped up then, that's quite funny.
Probably got physically stronger with this release as well. But regardless of that, what makes this Resurrección the very best are the 2 time-related abilities that come with it. Senescencia basically creates an invisible barrier around Baragon that completely ages and deteriorates
very OP.
and everything that attempts to come in contact with him. As the way he puts it, everything eventually dies, and therefore it's impossible for anything, living or dead, including most ranged attacks or Kido, to actually
get him because it'll have aged away.
Even something as powerful as Soifon's Bankai was able to be deteriorated and therefore detonated before it could actually touch him, doing minimal damage as a result. So with that ability alone, that should be enough to explain why this release is so unrivaled. Because it's impossible to get anywhere close to strike Baragon without basically sacrificing yourself. And basically any ranged attack you could throw at him would turn to dust before it could actually make contact, making him pseudo-invincible. But it gets even better than that with the addition of his ability, Respira. The best way to explain Respira is taking whatever allows Baragon to rapidly age and disintegrate everything, and turning it into a ranged attack.
That's just...
So now, not only
is
can
insane.
you not get close to him, but he can actively hunt you down from a distance.
Mental.
The way this occurs is by Baragon releasing a dark smog of sorts that he can project in any direction he chooses, and it travels insanely fast. This ability, like Senescencia, will age and disintegrate anything it comes in contact with, including Kido. And if this
That's
ability were
something
to touch
else as
you,
well,
the
yeah.
only
Being
way
able to
you
like
can
age
stop it
people's
from completely
techniques.
killing you would be by amputating the afflicted limb. Otherwise, it will simply spread and turn you into dust. In this release, Baragon also has an axe called Grand Kaida that he can use for melee attacks, or he can use it as a way to direct his Respira ability into a concentrated slash for more effective results. My main reason for believing this Resurrección is the absolute best is because it can kill or destroy anything in existence.
Yeah, which is
all while basically being invincible to anything
so
that could go against
crazy.
it. Almost any attack you throw at Baragon will be disintegrated before it can reach, and with a ranged form of this deterioration, there's literally nowhere to run from it, essentially showing it's impossible to escape death. And even if you are able to land a lucky blow on him, Baragon's defensive capabilities are still so massive that it would take a lot to actually kill him. In fact, the only known way to defeat this ability is to find a way to use it against itself, as death is the only one who can kill death. But as we saw, successfully being able to pull the reverse Uno card on him requires quite the personal sacrifice. With that in mind, I do hypothesize that one other Resurrección could possibly take this one down, that being our number 2, Ornikadas. As if Zael were to successfully use his black ink on Baragon, it would essentially result in Baragon fighting himself, making him vulnerable to his own abilities. But at the same time, this hypothesis is with the assumption that the black ink could even touch Baragon in the first place.
Does it age and get destroyed, or
the
what?
black fluid would likely deteriorate and disappear before actually reaching his bones, further showing us that this release is completely unrivaled in terms of an ultimate defense and absolute offense against all who would dare stand against it, making it unquestionably my choice for the best Resurrección in Bleach. When it comes to the unique appearance of Baragon's release, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it's sick. It looks dead
It's a
sick.
spooky skeleton, and as too spooky, I'm obligated to favor skeleton-based designs. But there you have it, everybody, the top 10 Resurrección in Bleach. Hopefully you enjoyed the video.
That was good.
Today
Yeah, I
and
like
agree
that.
with my list. If you did, great. But if you didn't, be sure to comment below what your top 10 would be and why. I'm very interested to hear what you guys agree with and what you don't. On that note, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next Bleach top 10, and smack that like button so I can make the top 10 Quincy
I want to see that.
abilities once this video hits 15,000 likes. Thank you all so much for watching this video today, and I can't wait to bring you some more great stuff this year. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at 2SpookyTube to keep up with the channel. Follow me on Twitch at 2Spookster to catch some stream.
Very good. That was cool. I like it. Like, it makes sense. The going through what the abilities do and the potential they have and that, like, yeah, that's very impressive. I would never think to put them in that order, but yeah, it makes sense. That was cool. Glad to check that out. And thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. Thank you all for watching. What did you guys think of that? What did you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what you want to discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.